The strike from my stepmother was sharp, timed perfectly with the click of the breaker switch. My father killed the lights. They thought the sudden darkness would hide the act, that the shock would silence me. But as her hand connected, my thumb found the record button. They needed me quiet. I decided to get loud. My name is Riley Davenport. I am 31 years old, and I am good at my job. At Northlight Urban Partners, I manage multi-million-dollar revitalization projects. I translate the chaos of zoning laws, concrete pours, and investor demands into gleaming, functional structures. I build things that last. I am precise. I am controlled. This is why I dread Thanksgiving. The drive back to Graywater Bluff is always a descent. The crisp, logical air of the city gives way to the coastal fog that clings to the cypress trees, smelling of salt, wet pine, and decay. The town itself seems perpetually damp. I left this place for a reason. I gripped the wheel of my sedan, my knuckles white, already feeling the familiar, suffocating pressure of my father's house. I pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching loud in the twilight silence. The house my mother loved, a warm, sprawling coastal colonial, was gone. In its place stood the same structure, but it was no longer a home, it was a fortress. Since my father, Gordon Davenport, married Marla Whitford, the house had been upgraded. It was now a smart home, and Marla was the administrator. My old key was useless against the brushed nickel keypad. I punched in the guest code, a code that changed weekly, requiring me to text Marla for access to my own childhood home. The lock beeped, a sterile, unwelcoming tone, and the heavy door clicked open. The air that hit me was cold. Marla kept the thermostat locked at a precise 68 degrees, a temperature just warm enough to be legal, but cold enough to be uncomfortable. The lights in the entryway were already dimmed to a pale, blue-white LED glow. They were motion-activated, and they followed me down the hall like a spotlight, casting sharp, sterile shadows. I checked the smart panel near the door, a small touchscreen glowing on the wall. The evening scene protocol was set for 7:30 p.m., but the pre-sleep mode was already active. That was new. Marla was tightening the schedule. "She's in the kitchen," a voice mumbled. My Aunt Lydia, perched on the edge of a stiff sofa, looking terrified of the upholstery. I walked toward the kitchen and paused. On the wall opposite the dining room, Marla had installed a bank of security monitors. For safety, she'd claimed. My mother's portrait used to hang there. Now, I saw the driveway, the back deck, the hallway I just walked down. But the feed from the dining room camera, the one angled perfectly to capture the head of the table, was a flat, digitized blue. No signal blinked in white text. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the thermostat. It wasn't a glitch. A camera in a smart home system does not just go offline by accident. It is taken offline. I stepped into the dining room. The smell was overwhelming. Roasted sage, the rich, fatty aroma of the turkey, and simmering gravy. But cutting through it all was Marla's signature perfume, a sharp chemical gardenia that always smelled like a funeral parlor. The table was set with my mother's wedding china, the silver polished to a painful gleam. The relatives were already milling, clutching wine glasses. Aunt Lydia, Uncle Marcus, a few distant cousins whose names I always forgot. They were the wallpaper of my family, present but silent. I counted the place settings. There was a seat for my father, Gordon, at the head, a seat for Marla at the foot, seats for Lydia, Marcus, the cousins, and a seat for Colt Whitford, Marla's adult half-brother. There was no place for me. It was not an oversight. You do not forget to set a place for the only daughter of the host. It was a statement. It was a message, delivered with the precision of a scalpel. "Riley, you made it." Marla glided in from the kitchen, holding a crystal pitcher of iced water. She was immaculate, her blonde hair pulled into a tight, architectural bun. Her smile was polished aluminum, bright and cold. "We weren't sure if you were gracing us this year," she said, her voice loud enough for the room to hear. She followed my gaze to the empty space at the table. She feigned a tiny theatrical gasp. "Oh dear, we seem to be short a seat. How clumsy of me." She looked around, her eyes sparkling with malice. "Well, we'll just have to squeeze you in at the corner. It's so important that guests know their place, isn't it?" The room went silent. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat and suddenly studied the ceiling. Aunt Lydia took a nervous sip of her wine. They heard it, the ice-cold emphasis on guests. Riley Davenport, was a guest in the house my mother had decorated, at the table my mother had chosen. I looked for my father. He was standing by the fireplace, swirling a heavy glass of brandy. He was staring into the flames. I saw his reflection in the glass of the china cabinet. He saw me. I watched the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. And then he turned his head, just slightly, back toward the fire. He did not nod. He did not smile. He did not say my name. In my 31 years, through teenage rebellion, college arguments, and professional disagreements, my father had never, not once, refused to meet my eyes. The floor dropped out from under me. This was not just Marla's cruelty. This was compliance. This was an alliance. "Riley, been too long." A heavy arm slung around my shoulder, pulling me into a side hug that was both too familiar and entirely invasive. Colt Whitford. He was 10 years older than Marla, but looked perpetually unfinished, soft around the middle, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He smelled of cheap, musky cologne and faintly of stale beer. "Looking good. Riley, city life treating you right?" He squeezed my shoulder. I stiffened, and he released me, holding his hands up in mock surrender. "Easy, easy, just being friendly." He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though I knew Marla was watching. "Hey, listen. Weird question. Your mom, she had that old floor safe in the study, right? The one behind the bookshelf?" My blood turned to ice. "Marla and your dad are just trying to find some old tax documents," he continued, his voice oily and smooth. "Just old papers, but for the life of them, they can't get it open. You wouldn't happen to remember the combination, would you?" My mother's safe, the one where she kept her mother's jewelry, her private letters, the original, unmortgaged deed to this house. "No, Colt," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I don't." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes went dead. "Ah, shame. Well, if it comes to you, let your old man know. He's really stressed about it." He patted my arm and slid away toward the bar. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a last-minute email from Northlight. It was an unknown number, a simple short text message. "Arrive 10 minutes later if you want peace." I read it 3 times. The timestamp was from 15 minutes ago. I had arrived exactly on time, at 6:30. This wasn't a warning. It was a confirmation. I was meant to walk into this ambush. Peace, not safety. Peace, as if the conflict was my fault, my responsibility to avoid. Who could have sent this? I needed air. I needed a moment to think. "Excuse me," I murmured to the room at large. "Just going to wash my hands." I walked past the guest bathroom. I walked down the hall, my steps silent on the thick runners Marla had installed, muffling all sound. I went upstairs. I pushed open the door to my mother's old bedroom. Marla called it her craft room now, but it was just a storage space for things she hadn't bothered to throw out. The air was still. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me. It wasn't Marla's chemical gardenia. It was something else, a heavy, musky, floral perfume I didn't recognize. It was strong, and it was recent. Someone had been in this room. I walked to the antique vanity, the one my mother had loved. The top drawer was closed, but not fully. It was ajar by less than a centimeter. I pulled it open. Her old jewelry boxes, mostly empty. I pulled open the second drawer. Stationery. The third. Silk scarves. Someone had been searching, rummaging, looking for the combination that Colt had just asked me for. They thought my mother would have written it down. They were sloppy. They were desperate. I closed the drawer, my hand trembling, and backed out of the room, pulling the door shut. I had to get through this dinner. I had to stay calm. I had to observe. I went back downstairs. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to chew. I retrieved a spare dining chair from the kitchen, a simple wooden one that didn't match the upholstered set, and wedged it awkwardly at the corner of the table. A visible afterthought. I sat. Marla was beaming, energized by her small victory. The cousins were discussing football. My father was seated at the head of the table, meticulously arranging his silverware, still not looking at me. The grandfather clock in the hall, my mother's clock, began to chime. Its deep, resonant bongs echoed in the silent house. 1, 2. I watched Marla. She was looking at the clock. 3, 4. She was waiting for it. 5, 6. She picked up her wine glass. She looked directly at me, her eyes bright and hard. 7. The final chime faded. "A toast," Marla said, her voice ringing out. She raised her glass. "To family, and to necessary changes." As the word changes left her lips, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod toward the smart panel on the wall behind my father. The lights didn't dim. They snapped off. The entire house plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The sound of the HVAC system died. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. Silence, total, immediate, and cold. The blackness was not just a lack of light. It was a physical weight. It was absolute, a void. The sudden removal of sight heightened everything else. The smell of the roasting turkey, the sharp tang of sage and thyme, became instantly, sickeningly overwhelming. The air felt thick with it. For a second, the only sound was the echo of the final chime of the clock. Then, the chaos began. A collective gasp from the table. Aunt Lydia let out a high-pitched, "Oh!" Uncle Marcus's chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor as he shifted. "What in the world? Gordon?" "The breaker," my father's voice said, sounding distant, annoyed, but not surprised. "Must have tripped the main." A beat of silence, and in that beat, I heard a different sound, the sound that proved this was no accident. The backup generator. My father was meticulous. He was an engineer by training. The house in Graywater Bluff, perched on the coast, was subject to storms and power failures. He had a top-of-the-line generator that was supposed to kick in within 3 seconds of an outage. We should have heard the thrum of it starting. The click-clack of the transfer switch. There was only silence. The generator had been accidentally disabled, just like the camera had accidentally lost its signal. My body tensed. I knew what this was. This was the play. The no-signal camera, the pre-sleep mode, the disabled generator. This was a coordinated attack. I felt the air shift to my left. I heard the swish of fabric, Marla's silk blouse. I smelled her, the chemical gardenia perfume, a scent designed to conquer a room, cut through the smell of the food. She was close. She was moving. I started to turn my head. Crack! The sound was sharp, dry, and loud in the darkness. It was the sound of a hand striking flesh. My flesh. The force of it snapped my head back. A bright, searing pain exploded across my left cheek. It was so sudden, so violent. I could not even process the insult. There was only the shock of the physical impact. Simultaneously, I heard the crash, a high, clear shatter, my wine glass. She must have swiped it as she struck me. The sound of the breaking crystal was the perfect cover for the sound of the slap, the perfect excuse for the sudden movement. My gasp was lost in the noise of the glass skittering across the table and floor. My cheek burned as if it were on fire. My eyes watered. A reflex I could not control. I tasted the sharp, metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Shock, pain, and then cold, sharp clarity. My job is to manage chaos. My right hand was in my coat pocket, the one resting on my lap. My phone was there. My fingers, numb and clumsy from the shock, fumbled for the side. I did not need to see it. I slid my thumb up the glass. I pressed the power button 3 times. A tiny, almost imperceptible haptic buzz vibrated against my leg. The microphone was active. The voice recorder was running. "Got you." "Goodness, Marla, are you all right?" Aunt Lydia's voice piped up, confused. "What broke?" "Riley startled me," Marla's voice said, smooth and unshaken. "I dropped a glass. It's fine." Across the room, I heard my father's heavy footsteps. "I'll check the box," he announced. I heard him walk into the adjoining hallway. I heard the faint, metallic creak of the breaker box panel swinging open. There was a heavy thunk, a switch being flipped down, not up, a sound of finality. Then, another, smaller click. My blood went colder than the room. The no-signal camera feed in the dining room had been a targeted disconnect. That second click. He had just killed the power to the entire security hub, the NVR, the router, every camera feed in the house. He wasn't fixing the power. He was murdering the witnesses. He was making sure the digital eyes were as blind as the human ones. "It's so dark. I can't see a thing." I heard Colt's voice, suddenly very close. I tried to push my chair back to stand up. The wooden legs scraped on the floor. "Whoa, Riley, careful." Colt's voice was right behind me. "You'll cut yourself on the glass. Don't fall." His hands grabbed me. They were not gentle. They were not helping. One large hand clamped down on my right bicep. The other seized my left arm, pinning it against my body. He used his chest to brace my back, locking me in place. "I've got her," he called out to the room. "She's shaky." I struggled, a sharp, involuntary movement of protest. His grip tightened, his fingers digging into my arms like clamps. The smell of his cheap cologne and the stale beer on his breath washed over me. "Easy, Riley," he whispered, his voice a low, oily threat meant only for me. "Don't make a scene. Just helping you so you don't fall." The whispers started, disembodied voices in the dark, the coward's chorus. "What is she doing?" That was Uncle Marcus. "She always was so high-strung," Aunt Lydia murmured. "Such a flair for the dramatic." "Riley, dear, please calm down." Another voice, a cousin. "Don't ruin the holiday. Gordon, please fix the lights. She's overreacting." Overreacting. I had been struck. I was being physically restrained. My father had just killed the power to his own house, and I was the one overreacting. The betrayal was a physical sensation, a cold fist closing around my heart. They were all in on it, if not in the planning, then in the compliance. The room settled into a tense, waiting silence. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing and Colt's, heavy behind me. Then, Marla spoke. Her voice was no longer the bright, brittle performance of the hostess. It was low, it was clear, it was stripped of all pretense, and it was right next to my ear. The gardenia smell was suffocating. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way." I froze. "You are going to sign the file," she continued, her voice a flat, cold command. "And then you are going to get out of this house, tonight." File? A hard rectangular object was thrust into my lap. It hit my legs with a solid thud. It was a leather-bound document folder. My left hand, the one not in my pocket recording, was pinned by Colt. He released my right bicep just enough for me to move my hand from my pocket to the file. I fumbled, touching the smooth leather. It was thick, stuffed with paper. "What is this?" My voice was a hoarse whisper. My lip was swelling fast. "Just paperwork, Riley," she hissed. "A formality. Your father is restructuring. We are just cleaning up the estate." I ran my fingers over the edge, trying to feel what it was. I felt the sharp metal of a binder clip, holding a signature page. Cleaning up the estate. My mind flashed to my mother's trust, the one she had left me, the one I was to co-administer. When I turned 30, I had turned 31 6 months ago. This was not cleaning up. This was a power of attorney. This was a waiver of executorship. This was theft. "No," I said. Colt's grip became painful. His fingers dug deep. "Don't be stupid." Riley, he breathed. A pen was shoved into my hand. Heavy, metal, expensive. Sign it, Marla commanded. I tried to appeal to the one person who should have been my protector, the man standing in the hallway, the man who had built this house with my mother. Dad, I called out, my voice cracking. Dad, what is this? Tell them to let me go. What is happening? The darkness in the hallway was silent for a long, agonizing moment. Then, I heard him sigh. It was not a sigh of frustration. It was a sigh of exhaustion, the sigh of a man who had already made his choice and was tired of the consequences. His voice came out of the blackness, heavy and thick with a weariness that chilled me to the bone. Riley, just sign it. I stopped breathing. Don't make this hard on your mother, he said. Your mother? He did not say Marla, he said your mother. He had replaced her, he had erased her, in the darkness, in the house she had loved. He had finalized the substitution. The sting from the slap on my cheek was nothing. This was the real blow, the one that severed the final thread. She is not my mother, I whispered. I could feel the phone in my pocket, warm against my leg. It was recording. It was catching his words. It was catching my dissent. Sign it! Marla's voice was sharp, impatient. Or I swear to God, Riley, we will... No. A sharp click came from the hallway. The lights flickered, they hummed, and then they flooded the room, bright, sterile, and painfully white. The sudden illumination was blinding. Everyone was squinting, their faces frozen in grotesque tableaus of the darkness. Colt was behind me, his hands raised in the air as if he had been trying to catch me from a fall. My father was standing by the smart panel, his hand just pulling away from the scene dinner override button. The relatives were staring, their faces pale, mouths open. My chair was pushed back. The shattered remains of my wine glass glittered on the floor. And Marla. Marla was standing a foot away from me, her face a perfect, radiant mask of shocked concern. I raised my left hand, the one that was free, and slowly touched my bottom lip. It was split, and it was swelling. My fingers came away slick and dark with my own blood. Aunt Lydia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Riley, dear, your face! What happened? Marla sprang into action, a picture of distressed hospitality. She grabbed a fresh linen napkin from the sideboard, dabbing at her own, perfectly dry eyes. Oh, Riley, you poor thing, she cried out, her voice ringing with false panic. When the lights went out, she must have stood up too fast. She tripped over her chair. Oh, it was awful. She turned to the room, projecting her story, cementing the narrative. She fell right into the table. She hit her face on the edge. Didn't you, dear? Such a terrible fright. It's all right. Everyone, it's all right. Just a clumsy little fall. She's fine. She looked at me. Her eyes were bright, hard, and devoid of all warmth. Her smile was pure, polished ice. The threat was unmistakable. Say anything. I dare you. My father walked over, his gaze fixed not on my bleeding lip, but on the broken glass on the floor. Colt, get the dustpan and brush. Lydia, let's get this turkey carved. It's getting cold. He was normalizing it. He was moving on. He was erasing the last 5 minutes of terror, reducing it to a mess on the floor. I sat there, paralyzed, the heavy leather file still in my lap. My cheek was a throbbing, hot map of pain. My lips stung. But in my pocket, my phone was silent. It was safe, and it was holding every single one of them accountable. I pressed the napkin from the table to my mouth. It came away dark. The metallic tang of blood filled my throat. I said, my voice thick and unsteady. I need to clean up. Marla's face was a mask of suffocating sympathy. Of course, dear. The downstairs powder room is just there. I didn't want the powder room. I wanted the upstairs bathroom. I wanted distance. I wanted a lock. I pushed my chair back, my legs shaking. I left the leather file on the seat. My coat, with my phone, was slung over my arm. I walked out of the dining room. The relatives parted for me, their faces a blur of useless, pitying curiosity. I bypassed the powder room and went straight for the main staircase. My father's voice followed me, already attempting to stitch the night back together. "Colt, let's clear this glass. Lydia, that turkey smells incredible. Let's carve." The sound of his voice, so normal, so determined to ignore the violence that had just occurred, was worse than the slap. I took the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. My cheek throbbed with a hot, pulsing rhythm. At the top of the landing, I paused. The hallway camera, the one Marla had installed to watch the upstairs bedrooms. During the blackout, my father had killed the hub, but I looked up at it now. The tiny green active light was on, but it was pointed at the ceiling. It wasn't just disabled digitally, it had been physically, manually tilted upward to create a perfect blind spot on the landing, right outside my old bedroom and my mother's study. This was not a mistake. This was not a glitch. This was methodical. This was premeditated. I hurried into the guest bathroom, the one with the good lock, and shut the door. The heavy click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the first safe sound I had heard all night. I leaned against the door, breathing hard, my eyes shut. I willed myself to be a project manager, analyze the data, form a plan. First, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I stopped the voice recording, the file saved. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, I saw the audio waves. Marla's hiss, Colt's threats, my father's voice. "Don't make this hard on your mother." I immediately enabled cloud backup, watching the progress bar. Second, I turned to the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. Her left eye was watering. Her bottom lip was split, a dark, ugly line against her pale skin. Her cheek was already swelling, a blotchy red stain spreading toward her jaw. I turned on the cold water and splashed it on my face, hissing as it hit the raw cut on my lip. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. A new text, the same unknown number as before. Medicine cabinet, bottom shelf. My heart stopped. I turned to the tall, mirrored cabinet. I opened it. Aspirin, mouthwash, faded, expensive guest soaps, a stack of fresh hand towels, the bottom shelf. I ran my fingers along the painted wood. Underneath the shelf, at the very back, my fingers brushed against something small, held in place by a strip of white medical tape. I peeled it off. A micro SD card? Tiny, black, and lethal. This was not a warning. This was an asset. My anonymous ally was not just watching. They were arming me. I fumbled for my wallet, pulling out the tiny SIM tool that doubled as an adapter. I slid the card into my phone. My earbuds were in my pocket. I put them in. My hands slick with water. I hit play. The video was date-stamped. Yesterday, 3:30 p.m. The location was the utility room, next to the breaker box. The angle was low, as if hidden in a basket of laundry. I saw Marla. I saw Colt. "Hit the main breaker now," Marla's voice said, sharp and clear. I heard the heavy thunk of the main being thrown. The image went dark. "Okay," Colt said. "Now the generator override. Did it kick on?" A pause. "Nope, dead silent," Colt confirmed. "Good," Marla said. "And the cameras?" "Hub is down, all feeds blank, just like you wanted." "Perfect," Marla's voice said. The satisfaction in it was reptilian. "We have exactly 5 minutes from blackout to oops, I tripped. That's our window. Make sure Gordon remembers to hit the hub switch after he flips the main. We need that lag." The clip ended. I stood there, the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. It was a rehearsal, a test. They had practiced. They had drilled the blackout. They had timed the assault. I saved the file. I backed it up. I took a deep breath. I looked back in the mirror. The swelling was worse, but my eyes were clear. They were cold. The shock was gone. This was not a family dispute. This was a conspiracy to commit fraud, backed by physical force. I deleted the anonymous texts, wiped the call log, and put the micro SD card into the tiny coin pocket of my jeans. I fixed my hair. I took one last, steadying breath. I unlocked the door and went back downstairs. The entire atmosphere had been reset. The broken glass was gone. The cousins were laughing at one of new Marla's jokes. My father was at the head of the table, carving the turkey, his face a mask of resolute, forced normalcy. I slid into my seat, the mismatched wooden chair at the corner. Marla stopped her story mid-sentence. "Riley, dear, are you all right? You look so pale." "I'm fine," I said. My voice was a monotone. Marla turned back to the table, her voice dripping with concern. "I was just telling everyone," she said, picking up her story. "Riley has always been, well, sensitive, prone to agitation. You remember, Gordon, that time in high school, when she got so worked up about the homecoming dance, she just snaps." She was laying the foundation, planting the narrative. Riley is unstable. Riley is volatile. Riley is a problem. My father nodded grimly, slicing white meat. "She has a temper, always has." "So if she seems upset," Marla continued, her eyes scanning the table, "it's just her way. She gets overwhelmed. I'm sure this fall just agitated her." I placed my hands on the table. I didn't fall. The room went silent. The sound of my father's knife scraping the platter was deafening. Marla's smile tightened by a millimeter. "Riley, dear, we saw you. You tripped." "No," I said, looking directly at her. "I didn't. You hit me." Aunt Lydia gasped. Uncle Marcus dropped his fork. My father stopped carving. He looked at me, his eyes dead. "Riley, that is enough. You are making a scene." "I'm stating a fact," I said. "You fell," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You are upset, and you are confused. We will not discuss it again." He sat down, placing the carving knife on the platter. He cleared his throat, a performance of paternal authority. "Riley," he said, shifting topics, "we need to discuss business. After the holiday, I need you to come by the office. We're restructuring the family company." I looked at the leather file still on my chair. "This? That is part of it," he said, dismissively. "It's time to simplify things. This tangle of trusts and partnerships, it's too much. It's a mess. Marla's people have drawn up some papers to tidy everything up. It's what's best for the family." "Marla's people? What about Mom's trust?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room. "The one I am supposed to be co-administering, as of 6 months ago." Marla jumped in, her smile a bright, hard shield. "Oh, that's exactly what Gordon means. It's all so complicated. The lawyers are handling all of that. It's best we just let them do their work. Dear, you don't need to worry your pretty head about it." "I want to see the trust documents," I said. "The originals." Colt, who had been shoveling stuffing into his mouth, let out a nervous snort. He was sweating. He fumbled in his pants pocket and pulled out a large, heavy ring of keys, dropping them on the table to free up his pocket. The jangle was loud. My eyes locked onto them. House keys, car keys, a bottle opener, and one, single, high-security tubular key. The black plastic fob was stamped with white lettering. GS 310. My heart hammered against my ribs. GS 310. I had seen that code before, years ago, in my mother's leather-bound address book. On the very last page, in her looping, elegant script, GS 310. The only thing that matters. It was the model number for the floor safe, the one Colt had asked me about. He hadn't just been asking, he had a key. Either he'd found my mother's original, or he'd had a duplicate cut. Colt saw me staring. His eyes widened. He snatched the keys from the table, his face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "Just my storage unit," he mumbled, stuffing them back into his pocket. He was a terrible liar. My phone vibrated on the table. A new message. This one wasn't from the unknown number. It was from Maya Lark, my college roommate and the best forensic accountant I knew. It was just a picture, a photo of her stupid orange cat. It was our code. I picked up the phone. "Excuse me," I said. "Work?" I stood up and walked into the living room, out of sight. I opened my encrypted steganography app. I loaded the image of the cat. The hidden text appeared, superimposed over the image. "Riley, red alert. Just traced a ghost inquiry on your trust fund. Coming from a Shell LLC. It's a full asset transfer request. Dated today. They are trying to drain you. Do not sign anything. I repeat, do not sign. I'm digging. Get out of there." The final piece. They weren't restructuring. They were liquidating. They needed my signature tonight, under duress, to push the transfer through. I couldn't stay. I couldn't fight them here. I had the recordings. I had the video. I had the confirmation. I had to get out, regroup, and bring in my own team. I walked back to the dining room. I grabbed my water glass. I swayed. Just a fraction. Putting my hand to my temple. "Whoa!" Marla looked up, her eyes sharp. I think when I fell, I hit my head harder than I thought." I slurred, letting my words thicken. "And I've had too much wine." Marla's entire demeanor softened. This, she understood. This, she could use. The unstable, drunk narrative was complete. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, her voice like syrup. "Of course. You're exhausted. You're upset. You should go lie down." "Yes," I mumbled. I'll go to my old room." I grabbed my coat. I grabbed the leather file. I had to take the papers with me. I walked up the stairs, my steps deliberately unsteady, holding the banister for support. I reached my old bedroom, the white door, the familiar brass knob. I turned it. It didn't budge. I turned it again. Locked. "It's locked," I called down, my voice thick with confusion. Marla was at the foot of the stairs, watching me like a vulture. "Oh, that's right," she called up, her voice painfully bright. "We had to change that lock, dear. The old one was sticking." She glided up the steps, stopping just below me. "We were getting a terrible mold problem from the damp. Had to seal the room for treatment. You can use the blue guest room. It's much cleaner." "Mold," I repeated, my voice flat, sober. "Yes, terribly persistent." I stared at the new, high-security deadbolt on my bedroom door. It wasn't there to keep mold in. It was there to keep me out of my room, away from my mother's study, away from the safe. "Fine," I said. "The guest room." I turned, leaving her on the stairs, and walked into the sterile, cold blue room that had never been mine. I locked the guest room door. The mechanism was cheap, a simple privacy knob, not the heavy, reassuring thunk of the deadbolt on my own bedroom door, the one Marla had just installed. But it was something. It was a moment to think. My cheek throbbed, a hot, spreading ache. My split lips stung. I ignored it. Pain was just data. I was a project manager. The project was survival. I dropped my coat on the floor and threw the heavy, embossed leather file onto the pristine, pale blue comforter. I sat at the small, sterile desk and opened it. The document on top was not a tidy up. It was a complete and total abdication, a durable power of attorney, granting Marla Whitford absolute, immediate, and irrevocable control over all my financial affairs, my property, and my healthcare decisions. The second document was a waiver, relinquishing my rights as successor co-trustee of my mother's trust. The third, and most insidious, was a pre-drafted resignation from my position on the board of the Davenport family's small holding company, citing personal health reasons and emotional instability. They were not just trying to steal from me, they were trying to erase me. They were building a legal cage, and my signature was the key. This night was not a sudden, violent impulse. This was the final, sloppy execution of a plan that had been building for months. My mind went cold, and the pieces, the small, disconnected data points from the last 6 months, began to snap into place. It started right after I turned 31. The first piece was the new family lawyer. My father had used the same firm, Harris and Sloan, for my entire life. They were old, reliable, and had handled my mother's estate. Then, about 6 months ago, an email appeared. It was from Davenport Estate Advisors. The address domain was a net, not a com, not a law, a cheap, disposable net domain. The email, which I'd ignored at the time, was full of Marla's breezy, empty language. Optimizing legacy holdings. Streamlining stewardship. It was her voice, dressed in a bad suit. The second piece? My work. I was lead project manager on the new Northlight Urban Partners Riverfront revitalization. It was the biggest deal of my career. 3 months ago, our final bid numbers were leaked to a competitor. It nearly cost us the project. It cost my firm millions in concessions. I was under suspicion until my boss cleared me, but the damage was done. It was a stain on my reputation. I had brushed it off as corporate espionage. But I remembered something. I had been working on the bid from home, and Marla had insisted on checking on my apartment while I was away at a site visit in Chicago. Just to water your plants, dear. We wouldn't want them to die. I had said no, that the doorman would handle it, but I came home to the faint, cloying, chemical smell of her gardenia perfume. She had been there. She wasn't watering plants. She was searching my laptop. Was she trying to get me fired? To destabilize me professionally? The third, and sharpest, piece, Maya Lark, my friend, and the best forensic accountant I knew. A month ago, I'd asked her to look at my personal accounts. A dividend check I was expecting from a small investment in the family holding company had simply vanished. Maya called me 2 days later. Her voice was flat. Riley, this is bad. The dividend didn't vanish. It was rerouted. The transfer was authorized on October 12th. I was in Chicago on October 12th. How? I had asked. I never signed anything. You did, Maya said, her voice grim. Or someone did. The bank has a faxed copy of the transfer request. It was submitted with a notarized copy of your signature. Marla. In my apartment. She wasn't looking for jewelry. She was looking for documents. My passport, my driver's license, my signature. She had scanned it. She had forged it, and she had a notary on her payroll. Where did it go? I had asked. A new entity, Maya said, formed 3 months ago, a trust, called the Whitford Trust. The fourth piece, Colt, who hadn't held a steady job in a decade. Colt, who lived off mysterious consulting fees. 2 months ago, he had posted a picture of his new car, a gleaming, perfectly restored, 1960s convertible, a toy that cost at least $70,000. He was driving my dividend check. The final piece clicked into place. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, here in Graywater Bluff. I had run into her at the market just before I left for Chicago. It is so wonderful, she had said, that your father has such attentive care. I was confused. What care? He's in perfect health. Oh, the truck, dear, she said. The Whitford home care van. I see it parked in his driveway for hours, almost every day. It's so lovely that Marla's family is helping out. Whitford Home Care, the Whitford Trust. It was a shell, a cover. A van parked in the driveway for hours would never raise suspicion. It was the perfect front. They weren't providing care. They were casing the house. They were searching my mother's study. They were testing the generator. They were finding the safe. They were planning. I stood up. The drunk act was over. The agitated daughter narrative was what they wanted. They mistook my shock for weakness. They mistook my silence for compliance. They were about to meet the project manager. I was not leaving. If I left now, I would be Riley, who got drunk and hysterical. Riley, who had a breakdown and ran off. They would control the narrative. They would use this file. Claim I had verbally agreed. No, I was staying. I was staying the night to see how far they would push. They wanted this signature. They would be back for it in the morning. I had to prepare. First, I texted Ezra Vale. Ezra was the opposite of my father's net lawyer. He was young, he was a shark, and he specialized in estate fraud and elder abuse. My text was simple. Ezra, emergency, Thanksgiving dinner. They just assaulted me and tried to get me to sign over my trust under duress. I have audio of the assault. I have video of them planning the blackout. I need you tomorrow. Coffee, salt and cedar, 7 a.m. Tell me you're available. A minute passed. The 3 dots of him typing were the most reassuring sight I had seen all day. His reply, I'll be there at 6:45. Do not sign. Do not talk. Record everything. Stay safe. We got them. Good. Now for the record everything part. I dug into my overnight bag, my old phone, my burner, I used for international travel. Its battery was full. I plugged it into a small, black portable battery pack. I opened the voice recorder app, enabled auto record, and turned the screen brightness to 0. I opened the guest room door. The house was quiet, insulated by the drone of conversation from the dining room, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of the relatives, already forgetting the violence, focused on the food. I crept down the stairs, my feet silent on the thick runner. The dining room was bright. They were all visible, their backs to the hallway, focused on my father as he carved the turkey. I didn't enter the dining room. I stayed in the hall. I knelt by the table, as if I had dropped something. Under the heavy, dark wood of my mother's table, there was a thick central support beam. It was dark, dusty, and perfect. I used a strip of black gaffer's tape from my bag and secured the phone and battery pack to the underside. Right at the head of the table, the microphone was clear. It would hear every whisper, every deal, every threat, 24/7. I stood up. I walked back into the dining room. I sat down on my mismatched chair. Every head turned. Marla's eyes narrowed. This was not part of her plan. The unstable daughter was supposed to be hiding, crying. My father paused, the carving knife in his hand. I picked up my fork. Sorry, I said, my voice clear and cold. My lip throbbed as I spoke. I just needed a minute. My head is clear now. I looked directly at my father. You said you wanted to talk about these papers, I said, tapping the leather file I had brought back with me. Let's talk. I woke at 5 a.m., before the sun. The guest room was cold, the air thin and sterile. I hadn't slept. I had sat in the dark. My mind a cold engine, processing the data, the audio file, the video rehearsal, Maya's warning. My cheek was a stiff, purple mass. My lip was cracked and swollen. I photographed it, the harsh bathroom light documenting the deep purple of the bruise, the split skin. Data. I showered and dressed in my most severe professional clothes, a dark gray wool sheath dress and a sharp-shouldered blazer, armor. At 6:15 a.m., there was a light, theatrical tap at my door. Riley, dear, are you awake? I opened it. Marla stood there, her face a perfect Rembrandt of concerned sympathy. She was holding a tall glass of water, 2 white pills, and an ice pack wrapped in a linen napkin. I brought you some painkillers, she cooed, her voice a warm, syrupy whisper. And ice for your fall. You must be in dreadful pain. She glided into the room, placing the items on the nightstand. She fussed with the pillow, her eyes flicking to the leather file I had placed neatly on the desk. You really must be more careful. Dear, she said, her voice dropping. It gave us all such a fright. You know how agitated you get. She turned, her back to me, and straightened a picture frame. It's probably for the best, she continued, her voice confidential, that we don't mention this to anyone outside the family. You know how people talk. It would be embarrassing. For you. All this drama. I picked up the glass of water. You're right, Marla. It's embarrassing. Her shoulders relaxed. She turned, her smile bright and triumphant. She thought I meant I was embarrassed. She thought I was broken. Good, she said, patting my arm. You just rest. Your father and I have a few things to sort out this morning, but he'll want to finalize that paperwork. He just wants this all to be smooth for everyone. She left. I did not take the pills. I did not drink the water. I waited until I heard her steps fade down the stairs, the sound of the television clicking on in the living room, the morning news, the soundtrack of normalcy. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my father. The subject: legacy planning, urgent. The body was short, curt, and full of his passive-aggressive authority. Riley, we are meeting this afternoon at 1 p.m. sharp. Bay and Pine Advisors, 300 Elm Street. We are settling this. Be there. I am attaching the EIN for the advisory firm, as I know you'll want to verify things. Let's not have any more delays. My blood ran cold. He was giving me the EIN? The employer identification number? That was arrogant. That was sloppy. He was so confident in his new advisor that he was handing me the rope. I forwarded the email to Maya. My message: urgent. What is this? Pull the thread. I went downstairs. The house smelled of strong, burnt coffee and toast. Colt was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. He looked hungover, his eyes puffy and red-veined. His large, jangling keyring was on the counter, right next to the bread box. "Morning," I said, my voice flat. He grunted, not looking up. I went to the refrigerator, my mind racing, the keyring. It was my only chance. I had a single, coin-sized AirTag in my purse. I needed a diversion. I opened the refrigerator. "Marla," I called, my voice tinged with my confused, agitated persona. "The orange juice is it supposed to be this color?" It was a stupid question. It was just orange juice. "What?" Marla bustled in from the living room, annoyed. "It's just orange juice. Riley, for heaven's sake." As she moved past Colt to look into the refrigerator, she blocked his line of sight to the counter for one perfect, critical second. My hand, holding my own car key, shot out. I palmed Colt's keys. The AirTag was already attached to my own key fob. With one swift, practiced motion, I unclipped the small carabiner holding my AirTag and clipped it onto the largest, thickest ring on Colt's chain. The metal made a faint click. I dropped his keys back on the counter, a split second before Marla turned around. "It looks fine to me," she snapped, closing the refrigerator door. "My mistake," I said, my voice small. "I'm still a little fuzzy." Colt snorted, his eyes still glued to his phone. He hadn't seen a thing. I poured myself a glass of the juice I didn't want, my hand steady. My heart was hammering. Step 1 complete. I moved toward the sink to rinse my glass. Marla was watching me, and I saw it. Underneath a silver-domed cake tray on the kitchen island, a piece of paper was sticking out. It was taped there, as if to be hidden but kept accessible. It was not a recipe. It was a form. I could see the header. Change of contingent beneficiary. I needed to see it. I needed a copy. "You know," I said, my voice trembling just enough, "I think I do need that painkiller." I pressed my hand to my bruised cheek. I'll be right back." I walked out of the kitchen. I did not go upstairs. I circled back through the dining room. I heard Marla's voice, low and sharp, speaking to Colt. "Is the truck ready?" I crept back to the kitchen entrance, shielded by the doorframe. They were both at the far end, by the pantry, their backs to me. I moved, fast. I lifted the heavy silver dome. The full document was there. It was for my father's life insurance policy, a policy I knew my mother had set up, with me as the sole beneficiary. This form, already signed by my father, made the Whitford Trust the new sole beneficiary. My phone was in my hand. Click, 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 3 clear, high-resolution photos. I replaced the dome. I was gone. I ran upstairs, back to the guest room, and locked the door. My phone buzzed. It was Maya. Her text was just a screenshot of a state filing, a new LLC, formed 3 months ago, Bay and Pine LLC. The principal agent listed on the incorporation document? Colt R. Whitford. They hadn't even bothered to hire a fake. They were being the fakes, Bay and Pine Advisors, Bay and Pine LLC. They were arrogant, they were stupid, and they were about to get caught. I opened my laptop. I logged into the smart home security account. I was still listed as a user, though Marla had downgraded me from administrator. I still had access. I found the doorbell camera feed. It was active. It covered the entire front walk and driveway. I found the settings. Local storage only. I changed it. Cloud backup, automatic, all motion and audio events, retained for 30 days. I clicked save. Now, every person who came to this door, every word they said on the porch, would be uploaded instantly to a server they could not control. They could kill the power. They could smash the hub, but they couldn't erase the cloud. One last step. I had to set the hook. I pulled out my phone. I composed a text to my father. I copied Marla and Colt. You are right. I am embarrassed. I don't want to fight. This is all a mess. I looked at the papers. I just want this over with. I will be at the meeting at 1 p.m. I am ready to sign. I hit send. I grabbed my purse, my coat, and my copy of the leather file. I walked downstairs. Marla and Colt were in the living room, watching television. They looked up as I walked to the front door. Marla's face was a glowing mask of victory. Going somewhere, dear? Just for a drive, I said. To clear my head before the meeting. I'll be back. Don't be late, my father's voice called from his study. 1 p.m. I stepped out into the cold November air. The wind off the water was sharp, and it stung my face. It felt good. It felt real. I drove, not aimlessly, I drove to Salt and Cedar, the small, bright coffee shop in the next town over. Ezra Vale was already there, as promised. He was sitting in a back booth, laptop open, a ceramic mug of black coffee in his hand. He looked more like a tech CEO than a lawyer, all sharp angles, dark hair, and a mind that moved at the speed of light. He didn't stand. He just watched me as I approached. His eyes flicked, once, to the bruise on my cheek. His expression did not change. Riley, he said, a simple, cold acknowledgement. I slid into the booth. I didn't order coffee. I took out my phone. I took out the micro SD card. I took out the leather file. I have work for you, I said. For the next 30 minutes, I did not stop talking. I laid it all out. Not as a victim, but as a project manager delivering a status report. Asset 1, audio recording of the assault, duress, and my father's verbal compliance. File name, blackout. Asset 2, video recording of Marla and Colt rehearsing the power failure and camera shutdown. File name, rehearsal. Asset 3, high-resolution photographs of forged and fraudulent financial documents, including a life insurance beneficiary change. Asset 4, forwarded email from my father confirming a meeting with a fraudulent advisory firm. Asset 5, corporate filings from Maya Lark linking Bay and Pine LLC directly to Colt Whitford. Asset 6, medical-grade photographs of my injuries, date and time stamped. I slid the phone across the table. I slid the file across. Ezra put in his earbuds. He listened to the blackout file first. His face was stone. Then he watched the rehearsal video. He took out the earbuds. He looked at the file. He looked at Maya's screenshot. He looked at me. Well, he said, taking a sip of his coffee, this is not probate fraud. This is a criminal enterprise. He leaned forward. They made 2 critical mistakes. 1, they were sloppy. The LLC, the EIN, the video. They're amateurs. 2, they used violence. He tapped the leather file. This is the duress part. This file is now inadmissible. Your signature, had you given it, would be worthless. But the act of forcing you to sign, that is the crime. So what's the charge? I asked. Plural, Ezra said. We have duress. We have conspiracy to commit fraud. We have blatant adult abuse. We have forgery. We have wire fraud. They didn't just tidy up, Riley. They built a RICO case in a single night. What about my father? I asked, my voice flat. Ezra's eyes were cold. His voice is on that audio. Don't make this hard on your mother. He is an accessory at best, a co-conspirator at worst. He is complicit. We do not shield him. We use his complicity to break them. Good, I said. Now, this meeting at 1 p.m., he said. It's a trap, but not for you. It's for them. You are going to go. You are going to walk in there, and you are going to let them talk. And you? I'll be close, Ezra said. My location will be shared with yours. My recorder will be running. Let them dig their own graves. Let them admit, on tape, who Bay and Pine Advisors really is. Get them to confirm the transfer of funds. Your only job is to ask questions. Be the confused. Agitated daughter, I finished. Exactly. He slid my phone back. They think you're a victim. Today, you are a witness. And tomorrow, you are the plaintiff. 300 Elm Street was not a downtown high-rise. It was a 2-story, beige stucco strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon advertising fungus-free Fridays and a vape shop with a neon purple alien in the window. The sign for Bay and Pine Advisors was a high-gloss plastic rectangle, the kind of sign printed in an hour. The vinyl lettering was already peeling at the S. This was not a legacy firm. This was a temporary setup. I parked my car, my hands gripping the wheel. I checked my phone. My location was shared. Ezra was offline, meaning he was already in position nearby. Invisible. My primary phone, the one they knew, was in my blazer pocket. I pressed the side button 3 times. The haptic buzz confirmed it. My microphone was hot. I walked in at 1 p.m. The office was a single, square room that smelled of new paint and industrial carpet glue. A cheap reception desk sat empty, adorned only with a wilting, sad-looking peace lily. Riley, you're late. My father, Marla, and Colt were sitting at a flimsy laminate conference table. At the head of the table sat a man I had never seen before. He was in his late 50s, pale and damp, with nervous, bird-like eyes. He wore a gray suit that was too tight in the shoulders, and the knot of his tie was crooked. Riley, dear, Marla said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. This is Mr. Healy. He's the senior heritage consultant who has been helping us clean up this mess. Healy shot to his feet, wiping his damp palm on his trousers before thrusting it across the table. Ms. Davenport, a pleasure. I am the senior partner at Bay and Pine. I looked at his damp hand. I did not take it. I just stared, letting the silence stretch, until he pulled it back, his face flushing a blotchy red. I sat down in the wobbly chair opposite them. Let's get this over with. Right, then, Healy chirped, shuffling a thick, stapled stack of papers. This was new, not the leather file from last night. This looked official. Your father and Mrs. Davenport have been very clear on their goals for a full legacy consolidation. We've just drawn up the final trust adjustment papers. It's a very simple procedure. Really, just a formality. He slid the top document across the table. This, he said, tapping it, is the primary waiver. It simply removes you from the role of co-trustee on your mother's original trust. Removes me, I repeated, my voice flat. It's a burden. Ms. Davenport, he said, his fake smile widening. All that paperwork, the liabilities, it's a headache. This document just simplifies things. It moves the administration of that trust's assets over to the Whitford Trust, which is a much more modern, agile, and professionally managed entity. Moves the administration. He meant transfers the assets. He meant steals everything. I had my script from Ezra. My mother's trust, I said, affecting a tone of confused due diligence. I'm not sure I've ever seen the full original document or the asset registry. Could I get a copy of the original trust registration? Just, for my records. Healy's bird-like eyes darted to Marla. Marla, in turn, fixed me with her bright, hard stare. Riley, dear, she cut in, her voice like ice water. This is not an audit. This is a family matter. Mr. Healy is here to facilitate, not to relitigate your mother's decisions. The lawyers have handled all of that. Which lawyers? I asked, looking directly at her. Harrison Sloan? Or your lawyers? Mr. Healy is our counsel, my father snapped, his voice sharp. Healy, just explain the tax issue. She'll understand the numbers. Healy looked profoundly relieved to be back on script. Yes, the tax issue. He fumbled in his cheap briefcase. Colt leaned forward, his elbows on the table, trying to look like a businessman. See, Riley, he began, his voice oily with false confidence. When you received that dividend distribution, there were significant tax implications, capital gains, and it appears someone neglected to pay the dividend tax on their quarterly earnings. I stared at him. The dividend, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That I never received? The one that was illegally rerouted to your trust? Colt's face flushed a deep, ugly purple. We fronted the money, he stammered, looking at Marla for help. We covered your mistake. It was a substantial amount. We're talking thousands of dollars. Riley, we're just trying to help you avoid IRS penalties. Healy slid another piece of paper across the table. It was a spreadsheet. It was a photocopy of a photocopy. The lines wavy, the ink blurry, the numbers under the columns, gains distribution, and Fed state tax liability, were nonsensical. Random figures. It was a complete and utter fabrication. As you can see, Healy said, tapping the blurry paper, your personal liability is significant, very significant, but, as a gesture of goodwill, if you sign the waiver today, the Whitford Trust has agreed to absorb that liability, to make it go away. It was a threat, wrapped in accounting jargon. Sign away your inheritance, or we will use this fake document to report you to the IRS. My phone, in my lap, vibrated, a text from Ezra. He's here. The cheap bell on the office door chimed with a weak ding-dong. Ezra Vale walked in. He was wearing a dark, perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than this entire office. He had his phone to his ear, his expression one of polite, professional annoyance. No, I understand, he said into his phone. But my client said, 300 Elm. Sweet. Oh, he stopped, looking around the room as if he had wandered into a closet. He feigned surprise, making eye contact with me. Riley? I stood up, playing my part. Ezra? What are you doing here? Marla's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. Who is this? This is a private meeting. This is Ezra Vale, I said, my voice unsteady. He's a friend from my work. He's in the legal department. Ezra clicked off his phone, his expression shifting to one of mild, professional curiosity. Riley, I thought you were meeting me at the cafe. I'm sorry to interrupt. He looked around the flimsy room, his gaze landing on Healy. What is this place? Bay and Pine Advisors? Healy puffed up his chest, trying to reclaim his authority. I am Mr. Healy, senior consultant, and this is a confidential family matter, sir. Is it? Ezra said, his voice smooth and cold. He walked closer to the table, his eyes scanning the documents. A confidential family matter involving trust waivers and tax spreadsheets. Fascinating. Bay and Pine Advisors. Tell me, Mr. Healy, are you registered with FINRA? Are you a registered investment advisor? What's your firm's CRD number? Healy began to sweat, the damp patches under his arms visibly darkened. We are a private consulting firm. We don't require public registration for family planning. I see, Ezra said. So you're not financial advisors. Are you attorneys? Are you barred in this state? Because this looks a great deal like the unauthorized practice of law. We provide structural advice, Healy stammered. This is harassment. You need to leave. I don't think I do, Ezra said. He pulled out his own phone. Because it's a funny thing. When I search the state corporate registry for Bay and Pine advisors, nothing exists. It's a fictitious name, but there is, he said, turning his phone screen toward the table. A Bay and Pine LLC, registered 3 months ago. He looked directly at Colt. Principal Agent, Colt R. Whitford. Is that you, sir? Colt looked like he was going to throw up. He physically shrank in his chair. You can't. This is private information. Marla shot to her feet, her face a mask of white rage. Gordon, call security. Get this man out of here. Ezra laughed. It was not a warm sound. It was short, sharp, and cold. Security? In a strip mall? Ma'am, sit down. This was my cue. I stepped forward, my voice trembling, playing the role of the frightened, confused daughter. I don't understand, I said, looking from Ezra to my father. You mean, this isn't a real company? Dad? What is this? My father was ashen. He was staring at Ezra, his mouth half open. He was completely silent. I don't feel safe, I said, backing away from the table. This whole room, it smells funny. I looked up at the ceiling. In the corner was a dark plastic dome, a fake security camera. Why don't we turn on the cameras? For my protection. If this is all legal, I want it recorded. Healy looked at the fake camera and then back at me, his eyes wide with panic. The network is down. The cameras are offline. They're not working. The echo was perfect. I let the silence hang in the room, thick and suffocating. Then, I turned my head, very slowly, and looked at Marla. Her hands were gripping her expensive leather handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. That's funny, I said. My voice was no longer shaking. It was cold. It was precise. That's the exact same thing that happened last night, isn't it? Marla's breath hitched. The network is always down when you're in the room. Marla, I said. My father finally spoke. His voice was a dry, cracking whisper. Riley, stop. Not here. Here, I said. Now, let's play a little game. I looked at Marla. I looked at Colt. I looked at my father. If the cameras at the house hadn't been turned off last night, if they had been recording, what exactly would the video have shown us? Marla took an involuntary step back, as if I had struck her. Colt just stared, his mouth opening and closing. And my father looked down at the table. He placed his hand flat on the laminate. His fingernails. Tap, tap, tap. A frantic, uncontrolled rhythm against the cheap wood. He was terrified. He was trapped. And he was silent. I'm not signing these, I said. I picked up the stapled packet, the fraudulent waiver, the blurry tax sheet. I'm not signing anything. You will sign, Marla shrieked, her mask of composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. Gordon, make her sign. She is ruining everything we've worked for. Ma'am, Ezra said, his voice calm and lethal. I would strongly advise against saying another word. I looked at my father, at his tapping fingers, at his complete and utter cowardly collapse. I will be having these documents, I said, and the documents from last night, reviewed by my own counsel, independently. That's him, I suppose, Colt snarled, jabbing a shaking finger at Ezra. That's him, I confirmed. This meeting is over. Do not, I said, my gaze sweeping over Marla, Colt, and landing finally on my father. Contact me again. Any further communication will go through Mr. Vale. I turned and walked to the door. Ezra held it open for me. A perfect gentleman. We stepped out into the bright, cold afternoon air. The ding-dong of the cheap bell was the sound of the trap springing shut. How was that? I asked, my voice finally shaking, the adrenaline roaring through me. That, Ezra said, hitting stop on his own audio recorder, was a confession. They admitted to being a fraudulent entity. They admitted the network was down, and their reactions to the camera question. That's consciousness of guilt. What now? Now, Ezra said, his eyes dark. We let them panic. They're going to do something stupid, and your AirTag is going to tell us exactly where they do it. We left the strip mall, the cheap ding-dong of the bell echoing behind us. We sat in Ezra's car, the engine silent, in a parking lot 2 blocks away. The adrenaline was draining, leaving behind a cold, sharp-edged residue. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was rage. They're panicking, Ezra said, his voice a low, calm monotone. He was staring at his phone, his face illuminated by the screen. They've never been challenged, not really. They assumed you were either too stupid or too cowed to fight back. Now they're exposed, and they're going to be sloppy. So we wait? I asked. We wait for the predator to run, he said. We don't chase, we track. As if summoned by his words, my phone, the one in my purse, vibrated. I opened the Find My app. The map of Greywater Bluff filled the screen. A single, blue dot icon, labeled Colt's Keys, was moving. It wasn't heading home. It wasn't heading to the bank. It was moving toward the industrial park, out by the old shipping yards. He's on the move, Ezra. Ezra started the car. Where to? Harbor 9 Self-Storage, just off the causeway. Ezra didn't ask any more questions. He just drove. The drive was silent. Harbor 9 was a place of transience, a sprawling complex of corrugated blue metal doors, hundreds of them, all identical, all anonymous. It was where people stored the pieces of lives they didn't know what to do with. Or, in this case, the pieces of a crime. We parked 2 rows over, behind a rusted pickup truck. Our engine off, we watched. Colt's restored convertible was parked directly outside of B block. He wasn't alone. Pulled up right next to his car, blocking the narrow lane, was the Whitford home care van. He's moving evidence, I whispered. Ezra was already on his phone. He wasn't talking to the police. He was talking to the storage facility's automated rental line. Yes, he said, his voice crisp. I need a unit, immediately. The block. What do you have? He listened. B14? What's next to it? He listened again. No, I need B13 or B11. I need to be adjacent to B12. A pause. This is an emergency. My documents are being stored improperly. I'll pay a $500 emergency access fee. He was a shark. He was unstoppable. 5 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a gate code and a unit number. B13. The unit directly adjoining Colt's. We got out of the car, walking low and fast, sticking to the shadows between the rows. We punched in the code. The metal roll-up door was deafeningly loud, a screech of grinding metal in the quiet afternoon. We slipped inside, pulling it down behind us until there was just a 6-inch gap at the bottom, enough to see, not enough to be seen. The unit was a cold 10 by 10 metal box. It smelled of dust and concrete. And then we listened. We pressed our ears to the thin corrugated wall that separated B13 from B12. At first, nothing. Then, click, whir, clink, the unmistakable, delicate, metallic sound of a high-security combination lock being turned. The dial was precise, expensive. This wasn't a padlock. This was a safe. A heavy thud as the bolts were retracted. A metallic groan as a heavy door swung open. Then, Colt's voice. He was on the phone. We could hear his muffled, panicked baritone through the wall. Marla? Yeah, it's a mess. He knew, that lawyer, or whatever he was. He knew about the LLC. He quoted the damn filing. A long pause as Marla, presumably, shrieked on the other end. I don't know how he knew, Colt yelled, his voice cracking. Look, it doesn't matter. We're on to Plan B. The agitated daughter plan is dead. We're on to the gone rogue plan. Plan B? My blood went cold. I'm at the unit, Colt continued. I'm moving the hard copies, all of it, the trust documents, the bank statements, everything. We move the assets tonight. liquidate the holding account, wire it straight to the main Whitford Trust account, and we shred every piece of paper that connects us to Bay and Pine. We say Riley was on board, verbally agreed, and then, I don't know. She freaked out and ran off. We can file a report. Say she's unstable. We blame her. Ezra caught my eye in the dim light. His face was granite. He held up a hand. Stay quiet. We heard another voice from Colt's unit, the driver of the van. Mr. Whitford? Got that delivery for you. Yeah, put it in the corner, Colt snapped, his voice still on the phone with Marla. Just shred everything. Marla, your computer, the files at the house, burn it. I'll handle this end. We heard the scrape of a heavy cardboard box being dragged across the concrete floor. Just put the shredder over there, Colt's voice said, no longer on the phone. The bank boxes go next to the safe. A shredder, bank boxes. They were actively, at this very moment, planning the destruction of evidence. I looked at Ezra. He nodded. Now. I pulled out my burner phone, the one with the voice masking app. I had the numbers Ezra had given me. I dialed the first one, the County Inspector General, White Collar Crime Division, which handled inheritance fraud and elder abuse. I turned on the app. My voice came out digitized, anonymous, and cold. I am reporting an active crime, a case of severe financial elder abuse and inheritance fraud. The victim is Gordon Davenport of Greywater Bluff. The perpetrators are his wife, Marla Whitford, and her brother, Colt Whitford. They are operating through a shell company, Whitford Home Care, and a fraudulent trust called the Whitford Trust. They are, as we speak, at Harbor 9 Storage, Unit B12. They have just taken delivery of a paper shredder and are preparing to destroy bank records and other financial documents. If you move now, you will catch them in the act of destroying evidence. I hung up. No name, no details, just the facts. My main phone vibrated. A text from Maya. She hadn't stopped digging. Riley, I am a genius, and they are morons. The EIN they used for Bay and Pine LLC. They also used it for another shell. Pine and Bay LLC. They just reversed the name. They're lazy, but it gets worse. A new image file loaded. I cross-referenced that EIN with all outgoing payments from your mother's trust. I found it. It's a support and discretionary fund agreement. For Colt, it's an allowance, $50,000 a quarter. I couldn't breathe. $50,000. Every 3 months. That's where the convertible came from. That's where his consulting fees originated. Where did the authorization come from? I texted back. My fingers numb. A final image appeared. It was a signature page. This authorized it, Maya wrote. It's dated 6 months ago, the day you turned 31, the day you were supposed to take control. I zoomed in on the signature. It was my mother's, Eliza Davenport. But it was wrong. It was too perfect. The ink was flat. The lines flawless. It wasn't a signature. It was a digital image, a high-resolution scan. The same scan. I realized that Marla must have used to forge my dividend transfer. This wasn't just theft. It was a desecration. They were using my dead mother's name to fund their lives. They had been draining her legacy for months, and now they were just moving on to me. As I was staring at the forgery, my phone rang. The screen flashed with a name that made my stomach clench into a cold, hard knot. Dad. I looked at Ezra. He saw the name. He nodded once, his face grim. Answer it. Speaker, my phone is already recording this room. I hit the green icon. My voice was a dead calm whisper. Hello? Riley. His voice was a shadow. It was thin, reedy, stripped of all its bluster. He sounded weak. He sounded, for the first time, old. Riley, you can't do this. Do what, Dad? I said, my voice as cold as the concrete floor. This, lawyer, this scene you made, you can't make this a scandal. Think of the family name. Think of the company. I can't handle a scandal. Riley, not now. I'm not strong enough. The plea, the pathetic, cowardly attempt to make her the problem, to make me the adult responsible for his reputation, for his weakness. The man who had sat silent, the man who had flipped the switch. A scandal, I repeated. The word felt like ash in my mouth. You're worried about a scandal. You weren't worried about one last night, were you? Last night it was a mistake, he stammered, his voice thin. Marla, she was stressed. You were provoking her. You've always known how to provoke her. Provoking her, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. By showing up for Thanksgiving? By existing in my own home? Riley, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Just sign the papers. We'll make sure you're taken care of. I promise. Just make this go away. I want peace. There it was. The motive. The entire rotten, hollow core of his betrayal. Summed up in one weak, selfish word. Peace. Peace, I said. My voice was low, and it was shaking now, not with fear or sadness, but with a terrible, crystalline rage. I have one question for you. Dad, and I want the truth. Last night, when the house went dark, I know you were at the breaker box. I heard you. Marla hit me. The silence on the line was not silence. It was the sound of a man drowning in his own cowardice, a thick, wheezing sound, as if he couldn't catch his breath. Did you turn off those lights? I asked, my voice a surgical tool, cutting away the last of his defenses. So that your wife could hit me in the dark? Did you do that for her, Dad? The pause that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It stretched. 1 second, 5, 10. It was an admission. It was a confession. It was a verdict. It was the sound of my father ceasing to exist. Ezra was staring at me, his face impassive, his phone held steady. Finally, a single, broken sound came through the speaker, a long, shuddering sigh, a complete, pathetic, moral collapse. He whispered, his voice cracking. I just wanted peace. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I ended the call. I looked at Ezra. You got that? I got it, he said, his voice grim. He just locked himself in a cell. From the other side of the wall, we heard the sudden, high-pitched vzz of a high-capacity paper shredder starting its work. Good, I said, my hand closing on my phone. Because the county inspector should be here in 10 minutes. The call I made to my father's house was the performance of my life. I pitched my voice to the exact frequency of a daughter who was broken, exhausted, and ready to capitulate. Dad, I'd whispered, the phone microphone held close. I can't do this. I can't fight. This lawyer, it's too much. I heard his sharp, relieved intake of breath. Riley? No, just listen. I don't want lawyers. I don't want strangers. This is family. Let's just finish this. Tonight. Just us. I'll sign what you want. I just want it to be over. Where? He asked, his voice suddenly stronger, the scent of victory in it. Not in that office, I said, my voice trembling. And not in the house. It's too much. The porch. Let's just sit on the porch. 7 p.m. Bring the papers. We'll sign. And it will be done. Please. We'll be there, he said. I hung up and looked at Ezra. The hook is set. Good, he said. Maya and I will be watching. The live stream link is active. The cloud backup on that doorbell camera is your primary witness. The USB is your secondary. Go, run your play. The rain started at 6:30 p.m., a cold, miserable November drizzle that turned the air to gray gauze. It was perfect. The porch was the only dry place, a small, covered stage. I arrived at 6:45. I let myself in the front door. The house was silent. They were in the master bedroom. Preparing. I went to the front porch. The wicker furniture was damp, cold. I pulled the main table, a heavy glass-topped affair, directly into the center of the space. I positioned 3 chairs, one for me, one for my father, one for Marla. The doorbell camera, a small, black circle, was mounted on the doorframe. Its lens, wide and clear, captured the entire porch, every shadow, every angle. I had set it to cloud backup. It was an impartial, high-definition eye, uploading every frame to a server Marla could never, ever touch. I took my burner phone, the one not in my pocket. I opened the private live stream app. I tucked the phone into a large, leafy fern on the porch railing, the camera lens peeking through the leaves. It provided a perfect profile view of the table. I sent the link to Ezra and Maya. We are live. Finally, I took a small, white pastry box from my bag. Inside, among 2 almond croissants, was a slim black USB stick. It looked like a flash drive. It was a high-fidelity audio recorder. I placed the box in the middle of the table. At 7 p.m. on the dot, I heard the inner door open. They stepped onto the porch, my father, Marla, and Colt, trailing behind like an oversized, nervous guard dog. My father was dressed in his authority sweater, a heavy cable knit. He looked pale, but his eyes were firm. He thought he was here to accept my surrender. Marla was radiant. She was dressed in a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit, victorious. She was holding a new leather file, different from the ones before. Final Reconciliation Agreement. The gold embossing read. Colt was carrying a heavy black ballistic nylon bag, the same one I had seen him with at the storage unit. The shredder was in there. He was their cleanup man. "Riley," my father said, his voice a low rumble. He sat down. Marla sat beside him, placing her file on the glass table. "I'm glad you've come to your senses," Marla said, her smile as thin as a razor. "This is so much better, isn't it? Just family." The rain drummed on the roof, a steady, percussive rhythm. It was the only sound. "Before we sign," I said, my voice quiet, "I need to understand something." Marla's smile flickered. "There's nothing to understand, dear. It's just a final release. We all agree to move on. No hard feelings. No lawyers." "No," I said. "I need to understand what happened. On Thanksgiving, my accident." I leaned forward. My bruised cheek, a deep purple under the yellow porch light, was aimed directly at the doorbell camera. Marla sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. "Riley, must we? You were agitated. You fell. You hit your face. It was an accident. It's done." It's all so fuzzy," I said, playing the part. "It was so dark, and then all the cameras were off. It's almost as if someone planned it that way." Marla's eyes went flat and cold. She leaned across the table, her voice a low, vicious hiss. "It doesn't matter what you think happened. It was a power surge. The system was down. Everything was off. You have nothing. You can't prove a thing. It was the slip, the admission. Everything was off." I'm not trying to prove anything. "Marla," I said, my voice soft. I pushed the white pastry box toward the center of the table, just an inch. I want to be able to trust you. I want to be able to trust my own father." I looked at my father. He was staring at the pastry box. "Dad?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just cleared his throat. "Marla is right. It was a surge, a freak accident. These things happen." "A freak accident," I repeated. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out my primary phone. "Like this?" I unlocked the screen. I opened my photo gallery, and I turned the phone toward him. On the screen was a high-resolution screenshot. It was from the smart home control panel, the events log. It showed a scheduled, recurring event. Title: Blackout 7 p.m. Time: 7 o'clock p.m. Date created: 3 days before Thanksgiving. User: G. Davenport. My father went rigid. His face, in the yellow porch light, turned the color of wet cement. He did not breathe. He just stared at the screen, at the digital proof of his own premeditation. He stared at his own name. Marla, annoyed by the silence, leaned over to see what he was looking at. Her eyes hit the screen. The color drained from her face. She looked at my father. Her expression was not one of fear. It was one of pure, venomous rage. She didn't whisper. She hissed it, loud enough for the USB recorder to catch every syllable. "You incompetent old fool. You were supposed to delete the logs. You were supposed to wipe the system. I told you. You ruined it. You ruined everything." It was a confession. A full, glorious, unambiguous confession. My father shrank under her fury. A complete, physical collapse. Colt, who had been standing by the door, saw the dynamic shift. He saw the screenshot. He saw my phone. And then his eyes darted to the pastry box in the center of the table. He was not smart, but he was an animal, and he smelled the trap. "The box," he choked out. The pastries. What's in the box?" Before I could move, he lunged. He was not aiming for me. He was aiming for the pastry box. He was aiming for the recorder. He scrambled across the table, a clumsy, desperate animal. "She's recording us! She's been recording us!" He swiped at the box. His arm, heavy and thick, crashed into his own black nylon bag that he had placed on the edge. The bag tipped, went airborne, and crashed onto the porch floor. The zipper burst. It was like a piñata of their guilt. A small, portable paper shredder clattered onto the boards. Dozens of spiral-bound documents, and stacks, thick, heavy stacks of paper, all printed with the same letterhead. Bay and Pine Advisors. The fake trust documents, the fake tax liability sheets, the entire criminal enterprise, spilled out onto the porch floor under the unflinching eye of the doorbell camera. Colt froze, his hand still in the pastry box, clutching the USB drive. Marla screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated animal panic. My father just put his head in his hands and made a small, broken sound. And at that exact, perfect, cinematic moment, ding-dong. The doorbell chimed, loud and clear, right above our heads. Everyone froze. The sound was impossible. Colt looked up, his face slick with sweat. Marla stopped screaming. My father looked up, his face a ruin. The porch light illuminated the droplets of rain, turning them into falling diamonds. I stood up. My hands were perfectly steady. "I'll get that," I said. I turned and opened the front door. 2 people were standing on the doormat, a woman, in a dark blue county-issued polo shirt and a rain slicker, holding a clipboard. Beside her, a uniformed sheriff's deputy, his hand resting calmly on his belt. The woman looked past me at the scene on the porch, at Colt, frozen over a pile of fraudulent documents, at Marla, her face a mask of terror, at my father, who looked like a dead man. She looked at me, her eyes noting the purple bruise on my cheek. "Ma'am," she said, her voice calm, professional, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm Inspector Harris, County Adult Protective Services. We received a highly credible, anonymous report concerning the resident of this house, Miss Gordon Davenport." She looked at my father. "Sir, we're here to conduct a wellness check. We have reports of potential financial coercion, duress, and possible physical abuse." Marla found her voice. It was a high, thin shriek. "You! This was you! You bitch! You set us up!" She lunged at me. But my father was closer. He was closer to the wall. He was closer to the smart panel, the one that controlled the house. With a desperate, guttural sob, he threw himself from his chair. He didn't go for me. He didn't go for Marla. He slammed his entire body against the panel, his fist hitting the one button he knew, the master override, the one that cut the power to the entire house. Click. The porch light died. The lights inside the house died. The entire world snapped back into total, suffocating darkness. A beat of silence. And then, Marla started to laugh. A high, hysterical, gasping laugh in the blackness. "You have nothing," she shrieked at the inspector. "You see? Nothing. The power is out. Your cameras are off. You have nothing." The deputy unclipped his flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp white cone in the dark, illuminating Marla's face, twisted in a mask of terrible, triumphant glee. I didn't move. I just looked past the inspector's shoulder, up at the doorframe. In the darkness, a tiny red infrared light had just clicked on. The doorbell camera, battery-powered. It was still recording. It was still uploading. It was capturing the shredder. It was capturing the documents. It was capturing Marla's screaming, hysterical confession. "I wouldn't be so sure about that. Marla," I said into the dark. The tiny red infrared light on the doorbell camera cut through the darkness. A single, unblinking eye. It was more powerful than Marla's shriek, more powerful than my father's desperate act of sabotage. The deputy's flashlight beam sliced the air, landing on Marla, whose face was frozen in a rictus of horrified realization. "Ma'am," the deputy said, his voice a calm, heavy authority that filled the void. "Step back, now." Marla just stared at the red light. "Battery," she whispered, the word a puff of dead air. "It's on a battery." "That's correct," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "And it's been uploading to a secure cloud server for the last 2 hours. So has the audio from this." I pointed to the pastry box, where Colt's hand was still frozen, clutching the USB recorder. "And so has the audio from the phone in my pocket. You didn't just have a blackout, Marla. You had a full audience." The deputy moved, securing Colt's wrist. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to stand up, slowly." Inspector Harris stepped forward, her own flashlight illuminating the disaster on the porch floor, the portable shredder, the stacks of Bay and Pine Advisors letterhead, the fraudulent trust documents. "Well," she said, her voice dry, "this certainly qualifies as financial coercion. Deputy, please secure everyone. This is a potential crime scene." Ezra Vale stepped out of the rain, his suit immaculate. "Inspector Harris? Ezra Vale. I'm counsel for Riley Davenport. We've been expecting you." He handed her a slim, waterproof document case. "I believe you'll find this helpful. It's a complete package of the evidence my client has been compiling." The next hour was a slow, meticulous dissection of the truth. We moved inside, into the kitchen. The deputy found the main breaker, the real one, and flipped the lights back on. The sudden sterile fluorescent glare was pitiless. It exposed everything. My father was slumped at the kitchen table, his face gray, his hands trembling so violently he had to hide them in his lap. Marla and Colt were on opposite sides of the room, separated by the deputy. Inspector Harris laid out the contents of Ezra's case on the kitchen island, creating a timeline of pure, undeniable facts. "Let's start with Thanksgiving night," Ezra said, his voice the calmest in the room. He placed a phone on the counter and hit play. It was the audio from my burner phone, the one I had hidden under the dining room table. We heard the dinner conversation. We heard my father's voice. And then, we heard my voice, clear and cold. "I didn't fall." We heard Marla's reply. We heard my father's command. "You fell. You are upset. And you are confused." "That's a start," the inspector said, making a note. "Establishing a pattern of verbal coercion and gaslighting." "It gets clearer," Ezra said. He held up a tiny labeled evidence bag. Inside was the micro SD card. "Asset 2, from my client's medicine cabinet, planted by an anonymous party." He slotted it into a laptop. We all watched. The grainy, low-angle video from the utility room. Marla, Colt. "Hit the main breaker now. Hub is down. All feeds blank. Just like you wanted." "Perfect. We have exactly 5 minutes." Marla let out a sound, a choked little gasp. That's taken out of context. We were testing for the storm season." "And this, I assume, was also for the storm season?" Ezra said. He clicked to the next file. It was the doorbell camera footage from 1 hour ago. The infrared video was sharp, almost theatrical in its clarity. We saw the four of us at the table. We saw me hold up the phone with the blackout 7 p.m. screenshot. We saw Marla's face, twisted with rage. We heard her voice, clear as a bell, even over the rain. "You incompetent old fool! You were supposed to delete the logs." And then, we saw my father lunge for the power. We saw Colt lunge for the recorder. The entire conspiracy, self-immolating in high definition. That, Inspector Harris said, is what we call consciousness of guilt. And then, Ezra continued, there is the why, the motive. This was Maya's contribution. He laid out the printouts, the corporate filings for Bay and Pine LLC and Pine and Bay LLC. "You'll note, Inspector," Ezra said, "they share the same employer identification number, a sloppy, amateur move." "A fatal one," the inspector agreed. "My colleague," Ezra said, gesturing to Maya, who had just arrived and was standing by the door, "has completed her financial analysis. The timeline is precise." Maya stepped forward, holding a single-page report. "It's simple," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "The money flow from the Davenport estate into the Whitford Trust wasn't random. There were 3 major multi-thousand-dollar transfers. The first was on the day of the rehearsal video. The second was the morning after Thanksgiving, the day after Ms. Davenport was assaulted and presented with the first set of fraudulent papers. The third, and largest, was attempted this afternoon, immediately following the meeting at the fraudulent Bay and Pine office." "The blackouts," I said, the words landing like stones. "The blackouts weren't just to hide the assault. They were to hide the digital transfers. They were a cover. He'd kill the house system, kill the internal network, so the security logs wouldn't show an external login to the bank." "They were," Maya confirmed, "a tool?" The room was silent. The case was total. There were no gaps, no holes. It was a perfect, hermetically sealed case of fraud, coercion, and abuse. Inspector Harris turned to Marla. "Mrs. Whitford?" "It was him," Marla shrieked, her finger jabbing at Colt. "It was his idea. The shell companies, the LLCs. That was all him. He's stupid. He's a failure. He told me it was a simple restructuring. I'm a victim here, too." "A victim?" Colt lunged, but the deputy put a hand on his chest. You lying? This was your idea. You planned the whole thing. You told me what to say. You told me to get the key. You said he pointed at my father, was a weak old man and that she, he pointed at me, was a stupid girl who would just sign." "That's enough," the deputy said, his voice final. Inspector Harris turned to my father. He was no longer trembling. He was just still, a hollowed-out statue. "Mr. Davenport," the inspector said, her voice softening just a fraction, a professional courtesy. "You have been identified as a vulnerable adult in a case of potential financial and physical abuse, but the evidence presented here, the audio, the video of the power cut, also suggests your active complicity in these acts." She spoke to him clearly, explaining his rights, explaining his obligations as a witness, explaining his liability as a conspirator. He just stared at the kitchen table. He stared at the wood grain my mother had chosen. And then, a sound, a low, wet, gulping sound. He was crying, not the hot, angry tears of a man defending himself. They were the cold, late, useless tears of a man who had just seen the bill for his own cowardice, a man who had traded his daughter for peace and, in doing so, had lost everything. I just, he whispered, the same pathetic refrain. "I just wanted it to be quiet." "You'll have plenty of quiet, Gordon," Marla spat, her voice like acid. I stood up. I had not spoken. I had not moved. I had just watched the machine I had built do its work. "Inspector," I said. Everyone looked at me. My voice was steady. It was the only steady thing in the room. "I'm not a victim. I'm a witness. And I'm the complainant. I just want the truth. And I want an official, comprehensive report filed with the district attorney's office. Tonight. Inspector Harris nodded. You'll have it. She turned to the deputy. Please take Mr. Whitford and Mrs. Whitford into separate vehicles. We will take their full statements at the station. As the deputy cuffed Marla, she turned to me. Her eyes were no longer panicked. They were just empty, full of a cold, black hatred. You think you've won, she whispered. You've just destroyed your own family. She jerked her cuffed hands toward my father. We'll never forgive you for this. You're wrong, Marla, I said. There's nothing left to forgive, and there's nothing left to destroy. You already took care of that. Ezra stepped forward as they were led out into the rain. He touched my arm. Riley, one last thing. I'm filing for an emergency protective order, a temporary restraining order, effective immediately. They are legally barred from contacting you, your place of work, or coming within 500 feet of you, and I'm including your father in that order. I looked at my father, still weeping his silent, useless tears at the kitchen table. Yes, I said. Include him, especially him. The emergency hearing was not held in a grand, wood-paneled courtroom. It was in a small, sterile, fluorescent-lit room in the county courthouse, a place designed for processing, not for drama, but the air was just as heavy. We were there for the restraining order, but the assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Kincaid, having reviewed Ezra's evidence package and the inspector's report, had escalated it. This was a preliminary hearing on the criminal charges. Marla was there, in a wrinkled pantsuit, her face a pale, blotchy mask of rage. Colt was next to her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes on the floor. He already looked defeated. My father sat in the back row. He was not with them. He was not with me. He was an island, gray and shrinking. Your Honor, Ada Kincaid began, her voice a sharp, clear instrument. The state is pursuing multiple felony charges against Marla Whitford and Colt Whitford. She did not pace. She stood still and she built her case, brick by digital brick. We are not here today based on, he said, she said. We are here based on an immutable, time-stamped digital record of a conspiracy. The state submits Exhibit A, a video file from the defendant's own security system, showing them rehearsing a power failure timed to the minute. She played the microSD card video on a large monitor. The room watched Marla and Colt. Hub is down, all feeds blank. Marla's lawyer, a cheap-looking man from the strip mall, objected. Speculation, Your Honor. Overruled, the judge said, his eyes on the screen. Continue, Ms. Kincaid. Exhibit B, Kincaid said. An audio file from Thanksgiving night. It captures the defendant, Marla Whitford, committing battery against the victim, Ms. Davenport, under the cover of the rehearsed blackout. She played the audio from my pocket, the crack of the slap, the sound of the glass breaking, and then Marla's voice, cold and low. You are going to sign the file. And my father's, don't make this hard on your mother. My father flinched as his own voice filled the room. Exhibit C, Kincaid continued, her voice relentless. The corporate filings for two fraudulent shell companies, Bay and Pine LLC and Pine and Bay LLC, both registered to the defendant, Colt Whitford, and both, she held up Maya's report, sharing the same EIN. Exhibit D, she said, the financial forensics, a direct timeline showing fraudulent transfers from the victim's trust and the victim's mother's trust, authorized by a forged signature, into the Whitford Trust. These transfers align, to the hour, with the blackouts. Exhibit E, Kincaid said, her voice dropping. Infrared video from the victim's doorbell camera. Time-stamped last night, the camera, which the defendants believed was disabled, recorded them attempting to destroy evidence and admitting to the conspiracy. She played the final clip, the porch, the spilled documents, and Marla's shriek, filling the courtroom. You incompetent old fool! You were supposed to delete the logs. The judge looked at Marla. Ma'am, I would advise you to remain silent. The charges, Kincaid concluded, are clear. For Marla Whitford, aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted grand larceny, and tampering with a security system. For Colt Whitford, conspiracy, wire fraud, and destruction of evidence. Colt's lawyer stood up immediately. Your Honor, my client is prepared to make a statement. He wishes to plead guilty to the conspiracy and fraud charges. He acted under duress. He admits to creating the shell companies, but it was at the direction of Marla Whitford. You spineless worm, Marla hissed, lunging at him before her lawyer pulled her back. Colt didn't look at her. He just looked at the judge, his face slick with sweat. It was her idea, he mumbled. All of it. She told me what to say. She told me to get the key. She said he pointed at my father, was a weak old man and that he pointed at me, was a stupid girl who would just sign. The judge nodded, making a note. The plea is noted. The allocation will be complex. He turned to Marla's lawyer. Do you have anything to add, counselor? This is a family dispute, the lawyer bleated. A misunderstanding. Ms. Whitford was merely protecting her husband's assets from an unstable. Your Honor. A new voice. It was my father. He was standing up in the back row. I would like to speak, he said. His voice was a dry, rasping thing. The judge looked at him. Sir, you are a party of interest here. You have a right to remain silent. I know, my father said. He walked forward, not to the stand, but just to the rail that separated the court from the gallery. He looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and empty. She's not unstable, he said, his voice cracking. Riley is not unstable. She's the only one who wasn't. He turned to the judge. Mrs. Whitford, Marla. She is correct. I did it. The logs, the event, I created it. The courtroom was utterly silent. The screenshot she showed, my father continued, his voice thick. The blackout 7 p.m. schedule. I set that. I did it. I knew Marla was angry. I knew she wanted to talk to Riley, to get the papers signed. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want yelling. I can't. I couldn't stand the yelling. His gaze drifted to me, a look of such profound, bottomless shame that it was almost hard to watch. So I flipped the switch, he whispered. I turned off the lights. I did it, because I just wanted peace. He finished. He just stood there, a man confessing to the moral, if not the legal, crime. He had confessed to creating the darkness. ADA. Kincaid's face was stone. The judge just looked at him, his expression unreadable. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Davenport, the judge said. He turned back to the matter at hand. Based on the overwhelming and undeniable evidence and the admissions given in this room, I am granting the full emergency protective order for Ms. Riley Davenport against Marla Whitford, Colt Whitford, and Gordon Davenport, 500 feet, no contact, direct or third party. He looked at Ezra. Mr. Vale, your civil motions? Yes, Your Honor, Ezra said, standing. We ask for an immediate, hard freeze on all assets held by the Whitford Trust. We ask for a full reversal of all transfers made from the Eliza Davenport Trust, and, he added, his voice like cold steel, we ask for a permanent protective provision that Marla Whitford be legally and permanently barred from ever acting as a trustee, an executor, a beneficiary, or in any fiduciary capacity related to any asset, present or future, bearing the Davenport name. Granted, the judge said, not blinking. All of it. He looked at Colt. Mr. Whitford, your plea is accepted. You are remanded to custody pending sentencing. Bail is denied. You are a flight risk, and you were caught destroying evidence. He looked at Marla. Mrs. Whitford, given the violent nature of the assault, the calculated premeditation of the fraud, and the attempted tampering, you are also remanded to custody. Bail is denied. A formal trial date will be set. The gavel hit the wood. The sound was not a bang, it was a thud. It was the sound of a door closing, the sound of a lock engaging. It was over. A deputy moved to Colt, another moved to Marla. She was put in handcuffs. I stood up, I walked past the rail. I walked toward the exit. My father was still standing there, by the rail, lost. He watched me approach. "Riley," he whispered, his hand half reaching out. I... He had no words. What was there to say? I did not say anything. I just reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out a small 4x6 photograph. It was old, the corners soft. It was my mother. She was standing in the kitchen, the old kitchen, laughing, her head thrown back. She was under the bright, warm lights, her face full of a life that this man, in his quest for peace, had allowed to be erased. I did not hand it to him. I placed it on the wooden rail in front of him. He looked down at the photo. He saw her. He saw her smile. He saw the light in her eyes. A sound tore out of him, a dry, terrible, broken sob. He didn't just cry. He collapsed, folding in on himself, his hands covering his face as he wept. He wept for her. He wept for me. He wept for the peace he had bought at such a terrible, terrible price. I did not stay to watch. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Marla was being led toward the transport elevator. She saw me. She stopped, pulling against the deputy. Her face was a twisted, ugly mask. "You'll be alone forever," she spat, her voice echoing in the marble hall. "You're just like her, a cold, miserable bitch who thinks she's better than everyone. You'll die alone." I just looked at her. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. She was just noise, a faulty piece of equipment. I didn't answer. I just held her gaze until the deputy pulled her into the elevator and the silver doors slid shut, silencing her for good. Ezra was waiting by the main exit. "It's done," he said. "It's done," I agreed. I pushed open the heavy brass doors of the courthouse. The sun was high, a bright, midday, November sun. It was cold, but it was bright. The light hit my face, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it didn't feel like an interrogation. It just felt like light. My father was still inside, in the dark, with his ghosts. I chose not to look back. I chose not to speak to him. I just walked down the steps, one foot in front of the other, and left him behind. 2 weeks later, the house was mine. The protective order was permanent. The trusts were secure. The legal machine was grinding Marla and Colt into dust. I stood in the kitchen, my kitchen, the one my mother had loved. It was silent. The air was still. The clock on the wall. I had taken the batteries out. I had a new light switch in my hand, a simple, white, manual switch, not a smart one, not one that could be controlled by an app, or a schedule, or a weak man. I opened the old smart panel. I pulled the wires, the ones my father had used to create the darkness. I cut them. I capped them. I buried them in the wall. I installed the new switch. My hands were steady. I aligned the plate. I screwed it in. I stood back. It was just a switch. I put my hand on it. I flipped it. Click. The lights came on, a bright, clean, uncompromising white. It filled every corner of the room. It erased every shadow. It was absolute. It was total. And it was quiet. That Thanksgiving ended in silence. But this was the first day of the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.